talking about incarcerated student success. So incarcerated students, Peter and I actively work in Tehachapi State Prison and Cal City State Prison. And we're gonna kind of run through what that looks like in terms of day-to-day. I'll give more of the qualitative stuff because I'm coming from an anthropological background. Ryan and Peter tend to be more of the hard quantitative side of things. So in terms of California, largest prison population could be said in the world, but definitely in the United States. We spend about $14.7 billion in 17-18 in the budget year, and we have 140,000 people in prison. Recidivism rates here at about 75% is usually the high number that people use. After 3 to 5 years, people tend to go back. It's just kind of a circular process. What studies have found, and this is according to the RAND study, is that 43% reduction in recidivism happens when prisoners or incarcerated individuals start to become students and get degrees. It jumps up to 51% reduction in recidivism if a degree is earned in prison, and that is our whole goal at Cerro Coso in these 2 prisons. And we just had 8 guys graduate at Cal City Prison a couple weeks ago. And I'm going to kind of jump into kind of what that looks like on a kind of micro level. So again, RAND report, basically this is the impetus to California passing a bill that put us into the prisons to teach. But it found that $1 spent on incarcerated education would result in $5 saved from the state. Now again, money talks. So this is where the policy stuff is coming from, is if we invest this dollar, then we're not spending the money in incarceration. Okay? Senate Bill 1391, which is kind of what we're talking about here. The bill encourages and compensates community college instructors. So before it was on a voluntary basis. So people were going in, organizations were, like up at San Quentin, were going in and offering degrees, but it wasn't being paid for out of the state. So we're paid just like junior college instructors teaching inside the prisons. It was signed in 2014. Cerro Coso Community College started in fall 2015 with 1 class, and now we're kind of moving up into 60 plus classes. So 2-year growth time has been a big ramping. Also, new policies at the state level are starting to create basically labels, positions for incarcerated individuals to be full-time students. So contrary to popular belief, incarcerated people don't just sit around and watch TV all day. The prison is like its own town. Somebody has to do laundry, somebody has to do the cooking, and that's what our students are doing. So we run into very similar situations in terms of community college presence, which is, do you go to work or do you go to school? So this past semester I had students who took a job rebuilding a roof because they were paying a decent amount and they were basically dropping out of some of our classes. But that is a real world problem that our students are having to deal with even though they're inside the prison confines. So some of the challenges that we deal with is 1391 came with no guide for implementation. The state basically said, hey, 1391 is here, you guys can go into the prisons, have fun. And we are having fun, but there was no guide. So we're in the process of building those things, that scaffolding and structure. We have 5 distinct yards that we're on, levels 2 through 4, 4 being the max yards. Layout and technology, I've been teaching at Tehachapi, and there is no tech. It's back to, this is really a chalkboard, huh? Wow. We don't have chalkboards, we have whiteboards, but that's basically, we're kind of back to a neo-traditional kind of teaching model in the classroom. The other issue, one of the big issues that we deal with is ducats. So a lot of these guys, if they have canteen ducats or visitor ducats or dental ducats or health or anything like that, they're going to get pulled from your class. And this again also acts as kind of a real life scenario. Students that are coming to our on-site classes have to deal with the same things. I have a doctor's appointment, I have family birth or death, those kinds of things are all happening. Trauma and resiliency is something that we obviously talk about a lot. Most individuals that come out of the prison population have some sort of post-traumatic stress disorder, and that is something that we have to kind of deal with and manage as a group. And then I'm going to talk, so some of the interesting things, the qualitative stuff that I've gathered, right, is that what tends to happen is that now that we have these guys coming in and they are dressed like prisoners, but they start to view themselves as students and not prisoners, okay? I have whole classrooms who have formed study groups just in my subject field. One guy in particular basically does a study session Friday afternoon in the library for my anthropology courses. And he is that guy, right? He's gonna major in the field. And they do that for each one of our courses. Somebody usually heads up the study group for those kinds of things. So these individuals are starting to see themselves more as students than they are prisoners, okay? And that labeling factor we talk about in sociology is huge for them, okay? In terms of, I'm no longer a prisoner or an ex-con, I'm now a student. And our goal is to create graduate students out of that and then them becoming kind of bachelor, BA, and move on, right? There is a multiplier effect. So a lot of times when we look at prison populations, it's passed down generationally. So if we have incarcerated parents that leave the prisons and go home and start to tell their kids, hey, I'm a student, you need to see me as a student, and this is what I want for you, that has a huge multiplier effect in terms of our culture, right? Not only our local culture, but our California culture as well. Okay? In terms of a feedback loop, this is kind of the interesting thing that's happening, right? This policy that's been passed down to us, right, is now implemented into the classrooms. And students are also starting to see that the state of California might actually like them. Whereas before it was a very adversarial role. There's been a kind of change in mentality. And we have to do some reiteration of that stuff because of the day-to-day trauma and whatnot that they're dealing with. But it's important for them to start kind of viewing that policy as a way of change and positive change in their lives. Some of the other things, correctional officers and administration, again, this is something else that we have to deal with on a day-to-day, which is, are the correctional officers who have real power going to let our students out and come to our classroom? So what is the relationship that we're forming with those individuals so that we keep getting our students coming to class? That's also another barrier. Okay? And then this is kind of the big piece, right? Which is encouraging all stakeholders. So whether it be the correctional officers, the administration, the warden, us as faculty, Ryan as a researcher and data analyst, and kind of that creating that whole structure with the students involved, all having a piece of that stakeholder input and output is the key piece to that approach and creating this kind of culture around this process. All right?
All right, so I'm Peter. I'm a professor of administration and justice, so I have a little bit of a subject matter expertise in the area. Also, I just raised my hand when they asked if anybody wanted to go to prison. I thought it'd be really interesting. I had no idea what I was getting into. So now, this is our Cerro Coso's mission, and we just recently rewrote our strategic plan that Ryan and I were involved in for our next 3 years. And so we're changing some of these components, but to actually enhance these parts. So as it stands right now, some of the important things, of course, like every other college mission, but we could really leverage this. We have our own internal battle with other faculty that's going on as well inside. So this is a very distilled version of what we have, and then we'll get to the data. I love the data about it because it's just great. And so the learning opportunities that develop ethical and effective citizenry is a little bit of like my war cry for this particular program, as well as that we can be leaders in higher education. The program that we are deeply involved in, and we have a huge team of people, is now, we're the most comprehensive higher education program in prison in the world through our school, which is very small. Within our district, we serve, Bakersfield College has a lot of this as well, but they're doing kind of one-off courses. We actually have guided pathway implementation. So the 8 people that graduated only started 2 years ago. So out of all of our Cerro Coso students, the most successful students to actually get a degree in 2 years are the ones inside of prison, because we have the ability to manage and schedule and integrate services on a micro level that's just so much easier. So we actually are becoming a leader. We just won an innovation award from the Chancellor's Office for $2.3 million to integrate guided pathways and new technology. So now our students inside prison will get tablets and things like that that they will be able to use and integrate. We're going to bring in our Canvas. I also teach online, a lot of online stuff, so we're going to integrate that. So it's really becoming kind of like a really great experiment to move forward with, and it's doing a lot of great things for the students as well. As he talked about, some of the qualitative stuff, but I like numbers. So, so we're doing all of these things, I guess is what I could say. These are our two facilities. That one is in the desert. You can't really tell the difference between that and our main campus. It kind of looks just like that, exactly the same. That's California City. There's 2,400 people there. That is a privately built prison called a 180 design. It's designed as a level 4 INS holding facility prior to deportation. However, CDCR leased it from them and now fully operates it. It's still owned by a private company, but it is not a private prison. It's a state prison, but it is just a private facility. The COs and all the staff are from the state. That's level 2 general population, which is just, that's your standard prison, you know, whatever you've seen on the movies or whatever, stuff like that, racial groups, all these dynamics are happening inside of our class at that prison. This prison is one of the largest in the state. It has 5 yards, 2 of them are level 4. I teach in maximum security level 4, 3 and 2. They go in reverse order. This one is a special needs yard and integrated mixed populations depending on the yard or the place. So the special needs is like gang dropouts. It might be people who've been sexually assaulted within prison or victims of things. But to identify these students as drastically different as another student in another campus is not really how we're going about it right now. They're all students that are in prison. It's just the way that the yard is broken up. So this is what it looks like. So we had 20 enrollments, which is basically 20 students in one class in fall 2015 when we implemented 1391. I came on board here in fall of 16. And now I basically teach full time. I teach 5 courses inside of, I'll teach 6 this next semester inside of prison. We have full classes inside of prison. We have 35, 40 people per class across the board. And so this is unduplicated head count. In a matter of 2 years, we've now gotten up to 631. So yes, only 8 students graduated, but those 8 students started in this class. So now that we have this amount, we're going to be pumping out a massive increase of completers for our program very soon, because we're also able to teach through the summer, teach more courses through the summer than we can on main campus. We have a lot of things that we've worked around, a lot of policies we have to work with, but in terms of how big this is to us as individually, it was this last semester, Ryan was able to pull a lot of the numbers. We had a hard time getting hard data because the way that the registration happens is on a piece of paper and then it's handed to someone who then hands it to someone, and the piece of paper makes a 200-mile round trip with multiple people's hands, big boxes of paper to be registered. We weren't getting accurate data on who was registering where you normally would for a regular student on campus because they go through CCC Apply, you get the demographics. We basically had a name on a piece of paper and would register that person. That's how we started. So we integrated some more data collection here, and by now we actually have almost completely complete records for almost everybody now, correct? We're missing some, but we're still working on it. Some of those were the students that registered earlier. So we have an ongoing thing. So what it did is our FTES, which is our full-time equivalent student, that's how funding apportionment happens inside of California. We get funded based on that. Our main campus on ground has 187, and our prison population is now at 215. So even though we have more unduplicated students on main campus, we're getting these guys through the program much faster with 9 to 15 units each. So the ability to actually complete the program is there, and that's what that's why we got the innovation grant. So there's a lot of great technologies and stuff out there, but the whiteboard, marker, and hard planning has gotten us the Chancellor's Office innovation award. So let's get to the real data of what it looks like. Course retention. So all of these courses were also, this is broken apart by subject, not by course, distinct course. We have 49 distinct courses with 63 sections, so some duplicated courses that we offered just this last semester. And then there were a few additional ones because this is an entire year, 2016 to 2018 actually for the last 2 years, sorry. Our enrollment number is 3960 for all our students inside of prison, and this is balancing it with our main campus traditional enrollments of 14,054. So what we did is we only balanced on these courses only if they were taught also on our campus during the same period of time. So to do the comparative analysis between how well are our students performing inside prison, how well are they performing outside of prison, we have to use the same courses taught at the same time to balance that. And it's been a little bit of a, Ryan just killed himself going through all of this stuff. So overall though, retention-wise, we wind up, this is all bumping up and down, the end numbers are, we have about a 1% higher retention over this time than we do on our traditional campus within our students in prison. And there's a lot of things that we need to overcome, people paroling out, people transferring to other institutions, and things like that throughout the state. Now, if we look at course success, this is like our little pride and joy now. Now that Ryan came on board about a year ago, before that we had no researcher. So we've had to ramp up very quickly in the last year since he came on board to get all this. I was trying to do all this assessment beforehand, and I have also a full-time job doing my job, so it was getting very difficult. So this is the same thing, but now we're looking at course success rates. Overall, our course success rates, I'm gonna have to look at what it says, is traditional success rates campus-wide are 66%, and our incarcerated individuals are 80%. So we have a 14% higher success rate inside of prison, and it might be the non-cognitive value stuff that we have, that we're talking about resiliency and things like that, and grit that these students have, as well as they're all adult learners, almost all of them. The average age is 15 years higher than our main campus average age. So we have a lot of really interesting things. And the big part that we've been discussing is kind of the andragogical approach, like not pedagogy, not kids anymore. These are adults with life experiences. They're adhering to the material a lot better, and they're performing at a much, much higher rate. And they have to write their research papers, their 15, 10-page research papers by hand with whiteout. And we grade them on APA format and the whole deal. And they don't have access to any other information. When we do the research report, they have to come up with their questions, they have to submit it. We work with our library to do personalized research, and then we bring them back vetted articles and bring that back to them. So our library resource center is all in on it as well. So we've really had to integrate every component in our school as much as we can. And if we can't, then whoever else can do that job does it. So instead of admissions and records admitting people, our educational advisors do it because they can do it, because they've chosen to participate. So overall, our success rate is about 14% higher. In some of the courses, it's even higher, much, much higher. Some of the other ones where we're having some issues is when people leave. So right now, when somebody leaves our class, there's no way to account for that person other than dropping them pre-census date, which means they wouldn't count at all towards the class, which is what some other schools chose to do when they implemented their prison program, and now they have a 100% success rate and a 100% retention rate, and it's inaccurate. So when a student leaves halfway through the semester, we have to decide whether or not we're gonna give them a W, or if we're gonna continue to maybe correspond the last part of the course. We're sorting this part out right now, but we have very accurate success rates if we use the same methodology that we use on our regular campus, which is if a student leaves halfway through the semester, that's a W and now they're failed, basically. That doesn't count towards success. So this is passing success. GPA-wise, my GPA in my courses, slightly more anecdotal, but I've been keeping track for the last 4 semesters. My GPA is about 10% higher than a standard traditional class where we'd be sitting in here right now on main campus, or a satellite campus that we have. We have 7 satellite campuses. Or online, we're talking about 25% higher. So also we have equity gaps in terms of, we're closing equity gaps in terms of racial demographics and things like that, ages and demographics. So we can effectively, we also have to be careful that this doesn't apply to our whole school, because we can close every equity gap at our school by using this population. And if we look at our school as a whole, we could say we've solved all the problems. We have success rates off the charts. Our African American male success rate went from 48% to 94%. It's perfect. We've done so well. But actually, it only applies to our prison. It's just diluting the data college-wide. So it's important that we disaggregate these students out, but then also that we can take this information and bring it back onto campus. And that's kind of the next big step of of how we're going to do that.
I think I have 2 minutes left, so
Sorry.
how much is this? So what is this data suggesting to us? Well, at the very beginning, it wasn't suggesting very much. With that first year that we piloted the prison education program, the sample size is still really, really small to draw any conclusions. But as you can see with each of the terms that we went through, the number of enrollments have increased. Actually, the number of unduplicated headcounts for these 3 years is, I believe, almost 800. So with that, we're able to draw some stronger conclusions. Our retention rates, generally they're about the same with our incarcerated students and our comparison groups. Our comparison group, which were our traditional on-the-ground or online enrollments. About 87 to 88%, so about a 1% difference. But even our retention rate for our incarcerated students was still a little bit higher. But the success rates, however, this is where it gets really, really interesting. These are students that, I mean, if you think about student equity, these are incarcerated students. They're probably one of our most disproportionately impacted student groups out there. They're very vulnerable, and you know the things that other students and maybe us when we were students that took for granted, such as emailing your question or to a faculty member, or even researching something online. That's something that they don't have access to. But our success rates here, 14% higher overall than our comparison group. 14% higher, and that's coming from a group with so many limitations, but they're still kicking ass with school. In terms of our next steps, this data is good. I like numbers. I like quants, but I actually started off as a qualitative researcher. I think moving forward, the numbers aren't going to tell the full story. Well, we're going to need to ask some meaningful questions with not just the incarcerated students, but also the faculty members and the people that are actually working and supporting the prisons as well. My approach moving forward is going to be based off grounded theory. I mean, this is I don't want to go in with any sort of biases. I have not developed any research questions yet or a hypothesis. I want to go in and do a couple of observation sessions with both Peter and Alec's class and kind of let the data guide my own research processes. Aside from the qualitative, I also like to look at some of the other cognitive metrics. I mean, we want to look at their unit load, their GPAs, their course safety patterns, persistence. Before we can even enter the prisons, what I'd like to do is establish an IRB for Cerro Coso. I know CDCR has their own IRB process, but moving forward, I think because this population is so unique and so vulnerable in many ways, we're going to have to cover all our bases and make sure that this research is done properly. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be doing focus groups this upcoming semester in the fall, as well as key informant interviews. In terms of the research, I mean, from what I learned, so we have other researchers within our district with Bakersfield and the district and Porterville as well. Bakersfield is also doing work with the prisons, but from my understanding, what the feeling I get is they're very hesitant to go inside the prisons. But that's where the rich data is going to be. And if that's where it's going to be, I want to go in there, even if it's alone. At least I have Alec and Peter. One of my outcomes for this is, I'd like to create some tools that other colleges can potentially replicate. When we talk about our climate surveys, currently right now we are not surveying our incarcerated student population. I mean, the rules of engagement have completely changed. There's so much information out there that we're not gathering, and I'd like to develop some tools based off the needs of the incarcerated students and develop those questions that way, as well as protocols for actually administering the tools. This isn't going to be as simple as sending a SurveyMonkey link to them. I mean, they're going to have to take the survey by hand, and right now it's just me serving a college and 5 campuses, and I'm not going to be doing data entry all day. So we're going to have to think of some strategic ways to collect this information. Last but not least, there's a lot of people assuming that these students are doing really well because they're not on Facebook or on Instagram all day. It's because they have all the time in the world to study, and which actually might be true. That might play a factor in it. But I think it's a little bit more complex than just those binary yes or no answers. I think this really requires a little bit more thinking and mindfulness when approaching the research. And hopefully this can address some of the social justice and equity implications that our work is also doing here. So, thank you.
Do we have time for questions?
Yeah, we'll take questions, sure.
Okay.
What do you got?
Or anyone else that presented.
My main question is about, well, it's sort of two-pronged, but the main thing is like support for these students after they graduate. Because,
Yes.
I've actually listened to a podcast from American Public Media Reports on prison education systems, and they know at the end of these sort of interviews with these prisoners that they're done with these educational attainment, and now they have the education, now they have this new framework and this new way of seeing the world, but at the end of the day, they're still in prison, and they're still going to be followed by that stigma, from having to check off, yes, I'm a felon, on employment forms and stuff like that. So do you guys have anything in mind for that post-graduation kind of support system?
Yes, well, we're lucky that that we happen to be alive during the period of time where a lot of this is changing, ban the box initiatives, things like that. We're working on the transition at our own school because I've already had students leave, parole, and now they're in my online class. So now we offer 5 associate's degree for transfers, pathways, 5 different degrees. So there is a little bit extra they can do. And then the next part is with the grant that we got, the large, or the award or whatever, we'll be working with CSUB and CSULA to provide bridges inside and outside. So there's already things like underground scholars from Berkeley. Project Rebound is a good one that's state funded. They're on 9 CSU campuses. So we're creating that. We have a shared governance aspect. This is just a very dense and complex thing that we've been working through for a few years. But as faculty, Alec and I move forward with a resolution to create a council just to address all of these issues. Okay. So no longer are we just throwing it off and saying counseling needs to figure it out. What we found out is that people have more than just implicit bias, but explicit with certain groups. So being told that I teach savages or animals or that I'm in a cult and all different kinds of things has happened from my peers. Understandably, they're apprehensive about it, but they need to be prepared because these are our students and they're coming onto campus next. Right. So if we do not have a way for them to integrate into campus, they simply will fail. And they will fail harder than every other student that fails out there. They need that extra support mechanism. So we're looking into that next aspect and creating clubs and things like that.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I had another part. It's sort of, so you teach criminal justice, right?
That's correct, yes.
So how do your students feel like when they learn some of the content of your course?
Yeah.
Like how do they deal with that on a psychological level? Because I feel like that can be very rough maybe to be sitting in prison and then to learn this is how you got screwed. This is all the ways.
Right. So they learn a lot of things because I offer the whole AST program. So they get foundations, which is kind of like a full overview of the criminal justice system in America. And then we have concepts of criminal law, so they actually get to understand elements of law and kind of the legal aspects of how law is constructed, defenses for laws, how prosecution works, evidence, everything like that. And then we have an evidential class, and then we have community relations. Those are the 4 I'm packaging for our degree inside. And it's been eye-opening. You'd think that people would get really upset about the context, and we have a very good debate for 16 weeks about it. And I'm not up there to apologize for the system or to say this is how it is, you have to abide, you're in the wrong, I don't preach down to them or condescend. Like some of the, Navoa had a great thing on how to interact with students, and we found that there are teachers that do that, and the teachers that don't do that have a great rapport with students. They get much more success than other students.
Right.
So we go back and forth. Actually, I have them participate, so they write to an assembly or the Senate on a criminal justice bill that is currently underway, and then we have to participate in that like civic participation. Then we have to break it down, and we have to do things like that. So whatever it does, it provides them with their own understanding of the system and where they're at, versus me coming in and just vomiting on them what it is, and just suck it up, you are where you are, kind of a thing. You have a lot of people that break down crying that they did things wrong. They're big on restorative justice, and a lot of that stuff. So we go through, it's a very emotional time sometimes through class.
I'm sure.
Yeah, it's fun. I have my own surveys on it about if it's more impactful or less impactful than other subjects that I've taken from my students. So I just need to input all that data. So I have like 250, 300 students, yes.
How can we get, or do you share this, or is there a website we can share this with other people? Is this such amazing
Yeah,
work?
you can share this. Yeah, we don't mind at all.
Yeah.
We are working now that with the grant thing. We're actually part of we have to develop a scalable model for the state. That's the next big push. So the chancellor's office wants us to do that. We're working on getting there, and then we want to kind of do a whole series.
Yeah, for us,
Up and down.
it's all outreach.
Yeah.
It's very new for the state
and it's open source.
the culture of California, but then the United States in general, right? I mean, when this all becomes as successful as we want it to be, the rest of the country is really going to have to start buying into this. And what does that look like? What does that culture shift look like? And we're all about being part of that wave. So, I mean, if you guys want the information,
Absolutely.
emails.
Just email
no
us.
problem.
I'll give you your.
I have a business card.